Welcome to Education Talks. I'm David Burke. Scott Bauer is an admission counsellor at Soka University, and he also works as an IBDP Global Politics teacher for the Dwight Global Online School. Scott also hosts the podcast Be a Global Citizen, where he interviews guests on the subject of global citizenship, something he's very passionate about. In this episode, I asked Scott for his own reflections on what it means to be a global citizen. Well, Scott, welcome to Education Talks. Great to have you here. Where in the world are you joining us from?
Hi, Dave. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be on the podcast. I'm very excited. And I currently find myself in Torrance, California. It's in the Los Angeles region, pretty close to the ocean. I happen to be in the west part of Torrance, close to Redondo Beach, the whole Beach Cities area. It's really beautiful here. It's quite different from where I was previously living. I'll definitely share more about this later, but I was in Brazil for several years, and that was just skyscrapers, concrete jungle, that kind of thing. Coming back to where I was born and raised is lovely and gives me newfound appreciation. Not to say that São Paulo is not beautiful, but just, I think that's, something recent that's happened to me to see that contrast. But yes, Torrance, California, a little bit rainy, but it's pretty much cleared up by now. And so we're getting back into the summer sun. Well, not summer, but the springtime flowers and the sun coming out. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I'm speaking to you from Singapore, where it's rainy and very cloudy here, but always summertime though here. So great to have you here. I'm hoping you can start off by just sharing a little bit about your career pathway to date, your career related to education. Just step us through the career of Scott Bauer.
Right. The career of Scott Bauer. Well, I find myself working at a university, liberal arts college called Soka University of America. It's in Aliso Viejo, California, about 1 hour drive from where I'm at right now. So a little bit of a commute. And I work there full time as an admission counselor. What's really special about this university, it's actually where I graduated, where I did my undergrad, and has a really special place in my heart. And I think as we, as the listeners will find out, it's really core to my outlook on education, as well as my specific interests in global citizenship. So there's that full-time role that I'm engaged with. I've been in the role for about 1.5 years. I also have a part-time job where I work as an IBDP, or International Baccalaureate Diploma Program, global politics teacher. A little bit like, of a mouthful, but like it's basically to say I teach global politics for the high school, and it's something that I've been doing for almost 1 year now with Dwight Global Online School. And so how I got to this world of education, it wasn't something that I, from a very young age, was like dreaming of being a teacher, right? Wanting to engage, others in discussions about education. But I kind of fell into it in many ways. After graduating, the first job that I had was actually not remotely close to education. It was actually in construction work, which sounds a little bit absurd. I think back on that, and I'm like, wow, I was crazy just to decide that was a good idea. But it was, even in hindsight, I just found myself really wanting to travel. I had many opportunities to travel as an undergrad. I feel very privileged to have had those experiences. And I went to Canada, did construction work for a couple of months. Then from there, other part-time jobs. I was at a Japanese karaoke bar, just, serving tables and pouring drinks, making cocktails. It wasn't until like I had amassed enough money to then buy a one-way ticket to go to Lima, Peru. Over there, I was doing more NGO work, and I felt that to be particularly meaningful for myself. I really had this strong connection to South America. I'd done a study abroad in Lima, Peru. In my undergrad, I was studying Spanish. So I wanted to apply those skills, and I wanted to be I wanted to be far away from California, which sounds weird. A lot of people in South America told me that I was crazy for leaving California. Why would you come here? It's like, no, but it's lovely here, and I want to learn from you. And I did that in spades. While in Peru, the NGOs that I was engaged with were very small. And one of them was actually a startup from a friend who's also a graduate of my university. It was called the La Casa Cultural Yuyay, which is like the cultural house of Yuyay. And Yuyay is a Quechua word, which means to remember. And so it was really oriented towards giving back to the community, really specific age range from like 11 to 13. And it just, the kind of workshops that we did just ranged from, soccer to, reading and literature to dance and, just all these different fun activities that we really drew from the community, from others who had more, specialization in said workshop. And I feel like that really started my interest in education, but still I didn't really consider myself as a teacher. I was just thinking like, I just want to do NGO work, and then I will find myself in the UN, because why not? That sounds like a worthwhile thing to do with my life because of what the UN stands for. And I even went so far as to bring my CV to the doorstep of the UN embassy. Like they were like stationed somewhere in Lima. Did not get a reply back until maybe a year later. But by that time I had moved on to other things. Nonetheless, I was still figuring a lot of things out. And it just so happened that I sent an email to another friend who's Brazilian. And there's this particular school in São Paulo. It's connected to the Soka University that I had, studied at for my undergrad. They have Soka schools. There's a whole Soka network, really, in 7 different countries. Singapore actually has one. There's Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, South Korea, Japan. There's 2 in Japan actually, and then also one in Brazil. And yeah, so I was just very interested in making that connection, tapping into that network. And they just happened to be looking for an international English teacher. And I figured, wow, well, I know English, so why not, take a shot on me? And fortunately they said yes. And I found myself in Sao Paulo. And long story short, from that experience, I can go into detail later, but I spent 6 years. I taught different subjects, was engaged in various projects and various campus-wide events, just really trying to build the school up, because they just so happened to be in a moment of expansion where they went from having the preschool up to the middle school. And then when I got there, they had the plan set in motion to expand to the high school and add on top of that the IB, the International Baccalaureate curriculum, specifically the diploma program. And that then set me off on the journey of learning about the IB, being a global politics teacher, and having a lot of fun figuring out what it means to teach, realizing that knowing a language is very different from teaching the language. And then with the IB, so much of it is teaching content through the language, since all of my students were Brazilians and they were speaking English as a second language. And yet here was this guy from the US trying to talk to them about international relations, right? Or peace and conflict studies and yada, yada, yada. So from that experience, then, that was a year and a half ago. I had this big transition after at the tail end of the pandemic to return back to California. I was a little bit burnt out from teaching, I'll be very honest. The whole experience was very draining, especially with the pandemic. Lots of troubles with, even the kind of organizational structure, the leadership itself. It was just, everything was strained, because of, the pandemic and then other pre-existing kind of things going on internally. So I just needed some kind of change. And and then I found that change with moving back to California and being in the world of higher ed in the Office of Admissions. It's been quite a journey so far, and yeah, still very excited about what's to come.
So that role in the Office of Admissions, Soka University, you also have involvement with Dwight Global. I want you to sort of just share what it's like working across two different positions. Obviously, one takes up more of your time than the other, but what is it like, and also what's it like working online with Dwight Global?
Yeah, well, I think that my background as a teacher really helped me in terms of the role that I play as an admissions counselor. I see it as this natural progression from like my experiences teaching elementary school up to like middle school, high school, and then now there's that transition period where the high schooler is exploring his or her options, or their options, to like colleges. And it's a whole process. It's a certain mindset. There's research, there's like soul searching involved, there's financial aspects involved. There's a whole host of factors to consider. And it can be very, very daunting. It can be very overwhelming of an experience. And so being able, like, I think my experiences of connecting with students and really trying to understand where they're at, by listening to them and engaging them and like answering their questions in like as direct way possible. All that training and skills applied to my job, and ultimately it's just talking with youth, talking with young people. I find that to be one of the most rewarding parts of being an educator. So in that sense, going to your first question, that's what I continue to do as both an admissions counselor and as a global politics teacher for Dwight Global. And what I love is that, there's such a range of engagement that I'm able to do in both jobs. With admission counseling, we're a very small school. We only have 450 students in total for the undergraduate program, which puts us in a category of our own. They're small universities, which people oftentimes think are maybe in terms of like, 1,500 to, let's say, 2,500. But then we're even below that. So what that allows us to do is have that individual approach to really get to know the person coming for a visit or connecting with us online. And then there's also the college fairs, right? We'll be sent to these college fairs where there are many other counselors, many other universities. They can be as big as 400 students coming in, and they can be as small as only 50 people stopped by, or even less. But knowing how to speak to the audience and make a connection, regardless of the circumstances. I think that also applies to the online setting where I do my teaching for Dwight. Luckily, I have a very, very small cohort. And so what that allows me to do is really dial in my focus on where they are at and how I can really speak to their needs and also give them the space. So yeah, I just feel like one definitely informs the other, and it's all just about connecting with young people. And then there was a second question that you asked me about specific to Dwight Global. Could you remind me what that was?
Just the whole working online. Like, what is it like?
Ooh, yes. Yeah. Well, before Dwight Global, when I was in Brazil, everyone was forced online, right? The whole world was forced online. But that was not by choice, really, for the vast majority of schools. So it was a bit jarring. It also felt, it was tough because I felt like I was not able to connect with them. I had certain expectations of what I wanted my relationship to my students to be like. And it just felt like I was somehow, inhibited, or there were blockages, and it not necessarily like any fault on my own, but I think that there was just so much going on in that particular moment of history where students were feeling completely isolated. They were cut off. They were just they were just not in a good place. So that initially gave me a more negative sense of the online space. But I think what really drew me back to it was, yeah, Dwight Global offered they have these three pillars that they highlight. One of those pillars being the personalized learning side of things. And I really can see that in terms of how they structure their classes, in terms of smaller cohort sizes, and the concern that we have as teachers to like really go that extra step to sending emails, scheduling times to speak one-on-one, talking with parents when it's not necessarily parent-teacher conference time, but really there's this all hands on deck kind of mentality that Dwight Global has when it comes to the online approach. And so that really filled in a lot of the missing gaps maybe from my first experience. And then also, going into this part-time work with Dwight Global, I was very intentionally choosing to teach online. So it was not like the past circumstance of like, oh, well,
Yeah.
this is what it is and you got to deal with it. In addition to the forced entry into online learning, I was also, or online teaching. Yeah, I guess online learning and online teaching, right? Because we were all learning at that point. But I was also asked to teach theory of knowledge, which is another subject in the International Baccalaureate. So it was a brand new subject. I was teaching online. It was a pandemic. Everyone's, rightly so, freaking out. And it was just not a kind of conducive teaching moment. But, then again, everyone was in the same boat.
So I guess, just for the benefit of the viewers and listeners, Dwight Global is an online school. And I'm fascinated by, there must be a bit of difference in the structure of a school design specifically to be online versus, of course, the rest of us who were sort of thrown online and managed to get through the pandemic. Fascinating stuff. I wanted to talk about your podcast. You recently had me as a guest, which was a real pleasure. It's called Be a Global Citizen. And I want to ask, why did you begin the podcast and when did you start?
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for being on my podcast. I really enjoyed learning more about your background as well as your thoughts on global citizenship. And what an interesting turn of events, right? We're able to interview each other. And I just find that to be so awesome and exciting. So thank you. And I started this podcast during the pandemic at the beginning part in 2020. I felt, it was a sense of like disempowerment that I think, everyone felt of just like what's going on. Everything was disrupted. I just wanted to do something in the confines of my small 1-bedroom apartment in São Paulo to feel like I was contributing in some way. I was planting new seeds to hopefully someday later, bloom, right, to blossom, whatever. And I also knew that I really wanted to talk about something that was, near and dear to my heart, which is global citizenship. And it just so happened that at the end of 2019, so this is maybe end of November 2019, I had just finished a fully online master's program, Master's of Education, through Dwight. Oh, not Dwight starts with a D. Through DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois, and this program was called Value Creating Education for Global Citizenship. So this idea of global citizenship was at the heart of much of the readings that we had, as well as the discussions that we partook in. And I wanted to continue that in a way, to have a project that would allow me to unpack that which I had studied for almost 2 years. And so that was kind of my thought process initially, was to continue my studies and my learnings from the master's program, and just create something of value. And then I quickly realized that there was a lot of value to be had in talking and connecting with other people from within my network as well as from outside of my network, and to ask them like, what do they think about when it comes to global citizenship? How does that apply to the work that they're doing? How does that perhaps color their experiences, or can be used as a lens for them in navigating this thing called life, right? I think that there's a lot to be said about how people view the other, and also how that ties into their multiple identities as a citizen, not only of the nation, the country that they were born in and have citizenship with, but in a deeper sense, kind of beyond just a national, mindset. So I thought, wow, what a wonderful way to network with people, and go beyond that, and see how my own thoughts are shaped and formed in interesting and creative ways through this engagement with other people.
Well, this is your chance to put that to the test, because I thought I'd turn the tables on you and actually use basically the questions that you've been asking people. And let's get some of your thoughts and reflections on global citizenship. So let's start off with asking, when the question that you've asked people a lot is, when did they first hear about global citizenship, the term? How about you? When did you first hear about the term global citizenship?
Yes, that's a great question. I think, not to toot my own horn, right? No, but I find that a lot of my thoughts about global citizenship, or just any kind of really deep reflections, started from my time as an undergrad. I kind of feel like that's when my mind really turned on, in a way, because so much of my past experiences were also something that I just kind of went about in a very automatic mindset. It was just something that was told to me, and I just executed it to the best of my abilities. And the reflective process was never truly there. And and so I initially was, at this university. The university itself has this mission statement, which is to foster a steady stream of global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. And I believe that that's the first time I really heard the term global citizen, and how I lived that experience in a way that I just hadn't done before, because it was not just something that was told to me, but there was a whole community of learners that were grappling with this. And the one of the unique components of the education that I received at this university was that there's a mandatory study abroad. And this happens in your third year after taking a certain amount of language courses. And for these students, everyone going abroad, it really put into perspective this idea of global citizenship, at least to get the ball rolling, because you're forced out. You're in a way, you have to be in a very kind of different environment, and you are just trying to make sense and adapt to all of these things. And so I felt like that all really accelerated my process and got me thinking about what can happen to my life. How can I use my life towards in a more contributive way, right? So all of this really ties back to this mission statement that I said, and that's really, I believe, what ignited this sense of okay, how can I really develop in a way that is true to this mission statement, that has just really compelled me to being not just global citizen, but I actually would go so far as to say that that is synonymous with being a good human being.
Mm-hmm. So that links to the next question. What does global citizenship mean to you?
Yes. So as I just mentioned, there's kind of a big statement, right? Global citizenship, or to be a global citizen, is to be a good human being. But that's there's many ways to go about that. It's for me, I really tie it to understanding your local actions, and having those local actions be informed by a kind of sense of mission about well, I've done X, Y, and Z in terms of my activities and what I believe to be contributive life. But how does that then go from the local and expand out to the global? And I think that there's a certain kind of mental gymnastics that happens in terms of really understanding, like on an abstract level, like that your actions do impact in ways that are seen and unseen. And yeah, and I think that's definitely one component of global citizenship in terms of like the cause and effect relationships that naturally occur. But yeah, I would also say that, like, and rather than just a set definition, because I feel like it's not necessarily to like box it in, to kind of like write it into stone and then be done, and you're just kind of, oh, I've done my job. But I think that one approach that I've really appreciated in terms of understanding what global citizenship means is actually by understanding different qualities that would basically count one as a global citizen, right? To kind of like descriptors, things that are more like, I guess like a North Star that would help inform you, guide you towards that never-ending process of becoming, that I think is important. So I really take my inspiration from this one particular Japanese spiritual leader, humanist, writer. He's a very prolific writer. His name is Daisaku Ikeda, and he's still alive. He's quite elderly. He's 95 right now. But he is the leader of this lay Buddhist organization called the Soka Gakkai International. Soka Gakkai means value creating society. And what he has done in his life is really build this network, this movement for peace. Of course, it's a religious movement, but I would also say that he has really pushed for kind of various reforms within not only the educational system, but also within the United Nations. He has consistently written peace proposals to the United Nations since 1983, which puts him at over 40 the annual peace proposals. But all this to say is that I really see him as a shining example of a global citizen, and he also has written about these qualities of a global citizen. So if it's okay, I wanted to share what Daisaku Ikeda believes are 3 essential qualities of a global citizen. This comes from a lecture that he gave at Teachers College at Columbia University. This was June 13th, 1996. And the title of his lecture was called Thoughts on Education for Global Citizenship, right? Very aptly named. And so he writes that there are essential elements of a global citizen. So he says, quote, "The wisdom to perceive the interconnectedness of all life and living." So that's the first one. The second one being the courage not to fear or deny difference, but to respect and strive to understand people of different cultures and to grow from encounters with them. And then the third one is the compassion to maintain an imaginative empathy that reaches beyond one's immediate surroundings and extends to those suffering in distant places. So these qualities really inform how I view this unending process of being a global citizen. Simply put, you can think of it as wisdom, courage, and compassion. But again, the way that he frames it is not just, I guess, conventional notions of what, compassion is like. Compassion being, oh, I saw someone who was homeless on the street, let's say, and I gave them $1, right? It's not to put, any judgment on what that action is and whether it has lots of value or not so much value. But I would say that certain notions of compassion fall under like a certain category of just looking out for maybe someone there. But clearly in this case, when they say the compassion to maintain an imaginative empathy, and this idea that it's not just for your surroundings, but people in far off places, yes, your immediate surrounding may have someone who is homeless, and that is definitely a crisis. Talk about Los Angeles having a crisis of their own. I lived in Sao Paulo, which is a mega city with over 12 million people, I believe. And it's just homeless people. They occupy, many, many different buildings in the city centers. But it's like, well, how to really engage wholeheartedly in certain crises that are right in front of you, but then also that are extending to so many other different places. So I feel that these 3 qualities really guide me in terms of how I can keep myself in check and also really expand my sense of identity as a global citizen and as work that is never truly finished.
Very true. What about suggestions for people to foster global citizenship in personal, but with particular focus on professional lives?
On professional lives. Well, I mentioned this before, and also in terms of like starting the podcast, it was, or even in teaching, right? That one-on-one connection is so important. I really think that the, you know, there's a lot to be said of like, creating like this idea of world peace. It seems too big to even imagine and ridiculous even. But I think that if you can really have that mindset with the person standing or, with whom you're speaking to in front of you, I think that would really do a lot. And I think to really value that exchange, to value that moment that you are sharing, that shared inquiry, perhaps when it comes to asking about jobs, right, in the professional realm, seeking out advice that maybe will benefit you with your career or your projects that you're engaged with. I feel that that this idea of connecting one-on-one speaks to a relationship process that does not it's not meant to discriminate, but to really strive and learn together with that person. And I feel again, as like I mentioned with the qualities of a global citizen, there's definitely a skill that comes with connecting and networking with other people. But I think that if we can really keep in mind these qualities of wisdom, courage, and compassion, it definitely it creates this invitation for the other person too to join you to a certain extent on this idea of like wanting to be more of a global citizen or more of a better person, right? In terms of like not just looking out for yourself, but looking out for that person. And it's far less the transactional nature of like, well, in terms of networking and doing that interaction is this for that, but it's also to just really check in or really have that imaginative empathy that I think is so vital when it comes to the whole job market and whatnot.
Wonderful. I want to blend a couple of questions now around recommendations and considerations. So just generally, what would be some broader considerations for people on this path to global citizenship, and then any other advice?
Broader considerations. Ooh. Well, I mean, I don't think there's so much, right? So I don't think I can quite share out all of this within the podcast. But I would say that there's a lot to be said of really trying to expand your awareness of other peoples and their voices, different cultures. It's kind of easy to think I can do that by going to another country, right, for however long. There's often this association with global citizenship as stamps on a passport. And yes, it's a great privilege and it's wonderful to be able to travel, but not everyone can do that. And I'm a firm believer that global citizens are not those who just go to, other countries and they just benefit off of like tourist, vacations. But it's, those that just have that mindset of really wanting to engage other people, make a difference in their community. And so, while travel is great, I also think other considerations towards being a global citizen would be in terms of like reading good literature, right? Having this thought of like wanting to look and learn about different stories, different traditions that, writing affords, really opening up new doors. Various different medias, I think, are opening up. Movies have been around, documentaries are there too. Even something as simple as like, as I'm speaking from more Western, U.S. perspective, is very common to just only watch what our culture tends to generate, right? In terms of Hollywood. I mean, I live right very close to Hollywood, but even for like, let's say the American who can watch like a foreign film and watch it with subtitles rather than dubbed. I mean, I think that also, that exposure is very important. So not like shying away from difference, but really leaning into that, having that curiosity, that wonder of like what life would be like in terms of other cultures, the other worlds that exist within, um, you know, this ecosystem of human diversity. I think that should be highlighted, that should be celebrated, and you can find very simple ways to do that in your day-to-day life without necessarily purchasing a very expensive plane ticket.
You mentioned books and movies. You ask this of your guests. You always ask what book or film would they recommend to an aspiring global citizen?
Yeah, right. Well, I think whatever book you're currently reading is always a good indicator of kind of like your interests. I mean, it could be something just for like leisure reading, something more lighthearted, but I also, happen to be reading for, the purposes of really understanding what is global citizenship. And so the book that I actually have on hand and that I'm about halfway done with is called Deep Diversity. This is actually a book that was recommended by one of my one of my interlocutors that I had on my podcast. Her name's Ali. She's wonderful. But yeah, she recommended that I read this book called Deep Diversity. Its subtitle is A Compassionate Scientific Approach to Achieving Racial Justice. It's by Shakil Chowdhury. And I really have enjoyed this book in terms of how he really breaks down what racial diversity looks like, what the current scenario is like in the US, and how we can, not be scared of the task of really deconstructing certain mindsets, and as well as like addressing structural issues that relate to racism within our institutions, within even our language, within our behaviors. I think that this kind of it speaks to the importance of greater awareness and how we can apply that in our day-to-day lives rather than just, pontificate and say, oh, yes, I believe in these big things, but you're not actually doing anything or you're not breaking any cycles. And so reading helps with that. But then also, following that up with conversation. I definitely look forward to reaching out to Ali and being like, I read the book, here are some thoughts, right? Trying to take that extra step, whatever extra steps that I can to really internalizing and, recognizing that this project of global citizenship is something that, is meant to add on to be inclusive and expand one's identity and not to just kind of settle for what is comfortable and, ultimately to stagnate, because clearly with all that's happening in the world right now, not just in terms of discussions on race, which are crucial in terms not just with the U.S. but also many, like I would say all countries around the world, but also in terms of climate action. We cannot just continue on with the status quo. We need to take action. We need to have some transformation in terms of our own beliefs and our mindsets. So I think that really ties into what I've shared are my thoughts on global citizenship, to really boldly advance in a way that we haven't done yet, but know that you're not alone, right? That there are other people that are doing the work and that are, sharing that same spirit of wanting a better world for future generations.
Wonderful. And Scott, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way that they can go about doing that?
Right. I would say email is the best. I'll be sure to share that with you in the description, but it's just my last name and first name. It's bowerscott15@gmail.com. And I'd be more than happy to connect and hear what all these other amazing professionals are doing with their lives, and hopefully have a conversation with them about global citizenship too. I'm always open to hearing other perspectives and learning from their thoughts on this, what I believe to be a very important topic.
Well, Scott, it's been wonderful to connect with you and for you to share your passion about the importance of global citizenship, and I hope that we can keep in touch. Thanks so much for your time on Education Talks, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Education Talks is an EdEvents production for the EdEvents community. You can keep up to date with the development of the community by registering on the website at ed.events.